Hello guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. Today I'm joined by Mike at General's Chit-Chat. Mike, please introduce yourself and tell our fans what are we going to talk about today.
Okay, sure. So yeah, my name is Mike. I have two podcasts. I have Genuine Chit-Chat, where I have different guests on each episode. So check that out. It's on YouTube. And I also have Star Wars Comics in Canon, which is also found on the YouTube page, where I go through all the Star Wars comics and that sort of thing. And you can also find both of them on anywhere that you listen to podcasts, like Spotify and that sort of thing. And what we're talking about, we are doing it's the fourth time I've been on the show, but it's the third episode and the final one in our little trilogy we've been doing. A couple of weeks ago, we spoke about The Force Awakens, and then a week or so ago, we spoke about The Last Jedi, and now we're on the finale, which is The Rise of Skywalker. So we've been doing the sequel trilogy, and it's been interesting. Yeah,
I know it's been some of the most fun conversations I've had on the podcast so far, and it's something that you can't anticipate. Obviously, to this day, sequels are a hotly debated subject, but it seems there is honestly no concrete pro and against opinions. It's like you come to a fan and they love it. You come to another fan, he likes certain things about it. You come to another fan and they hate it. It's like it's such a diverse, palette of opinions and tastes that it makes such an interesting topic. And I really wanted to hear your thoughts about it. But before we jump into this topic, right, discussing the rise of the Skywalker, and I hope we have the chance to talk about all aspects, the filmmaking, the acting, the story, where it went, the overall, the sequel trilogy. But first, please answer this question for me. Have you seen Dune yet?
No, I'm meant to be seeing it in like 3 days.
Interestingly enough, so I'm hearing a little buzz now in a Dune community on Twitter, in the Facebook groups as well. There's a lot of little comparisons happening. Like, oh, this is the next Star Wars. This is what sequels should have been. So it's just an interesting thing. I think it would be an interesting topic for you and I, such huge movie buffs, to sit down and after the fact that we have broken down the sequels to say like, what's up with this Dune thing? Is it really, worth all the hype? And is it really something that worth comparing Star Wars to?
Yeah, I'm very excited to watch it. It's because I've been waiting for my brother to be available and both our schedules and things. So it should be this coming Sunday. So fingers crossed, it'll be soon.
Awesome. All right, guys. So we're jumping right into it. Let's discuss, the rise of the Skywalker. And I want to kind of do just a tiny bit of preface and say that sometimes things that we don't like don't necessarily mean that they're bad, right? I just want to separate the two and say there's a difference between I don't like something versus it's bad. Just like a perfect example, let's say Al Pacino's Scarface movie. I think it's a tremendous film. It's important to watch. It has a great cultural value, right? It's artistically well done. I don't like it. The way it makes me feel, I don't like watching it. Again, just that little separation. But jumping right into the Star Wars sequels, Rise of the Skywalker. Mike, would you compare your expectations for this particular movie and also in comparison to episodes 7 and 8? What was your hype level for the film?
Okay, so there was two levels of hype. So there was one level of hype after I finished The Last Jedi, and I obviously knew there was going to be a third film. So I was like, oh, I can't wait. It's going to be really different. It's going to be very exciting. And then they're like, oh, no, we've scrapped this other script we had, and now we're going back with J.J. Abrams. And I was like, okay. As I said in the previous episodes, J.J. is renowned for either not really being able to finish things or kind of being able to start things really well and then kind of losing track in some ways. I know he wasn't involved with Lost the whole time, but that's an example. There's the Star Trek trilogy. He, kind of in air quotes lost interest by the last one. And for me, the last one was the weakest as well. So it's this kind of thing with JJ where I haven't seen everything he's done, but when I heard, I was like, okay, I wanted someone a bit different. I would rather have a more Rian Johnson Star Wars than a JJ Star Wars for that finale. And so that knocked me down a little bit, but I was like, I really like The Force Awakens. I thought it was cracking. At the time, I thought The Force Awakens was my favorite of the three. I think now it's probably Last Jedi, but at that time it was Force Awakens over Last Jedi. So I was like, not too bad. And then I saw the trailer, the teaser trailer, which I rewatched a moment ago just to remind myself. And most of it's fine. I think it's all really cool, and I was quite hyped. And then right at the very end, you get a Palpatine laugh, and it completely ruined the hype for me in the sense of, I obviously wanted to see it. I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and I had high hopes, but I just thought, okay, well, I know exactly what's going to happen in this film then. I knew from the moment Palpatine's voice I was like, well, Kylo Ren's going to turn. It's going to be really boring. It's going to be a copy of Return of the Jedi because Palpatine's in it. There's only one thing they can do. So immediately I was a little bit disheartened by that element of it. And then the second trailer came out and it showed even more of the plot. And I've made little notes down here. And there's so many elements that got spoiled in the trailer.
Right.
Like Lando flying the Falcon, the ending scene, like so many elements of it were just like, well, I already know the entire plot line. I know exactly who's going to turn and who isn't. And then there's a bit where Rey is like, oh, people think they know me, but they don't. And that sort of stuff. And it's like, and you saw Dark Rey in the trailer. And as soon as you saw that, you're like, well, I know that she can't, or I know that was in the Disney, one of the clips from one of the conventions and things, but like the extended trailer or something. But I was like, well, because they're showing that, it's not going to amount to anything. So it's going to be a really lame Force vision. Yeah. And so it's just every layer of hype that I had, whereas the other two films, there's a lot of mystery. There was a lot of, I don't know what they're going to do. Where's it going to go? What they do with Luke, what they do with this. And then with everything that happened, where they've already killed off Han Solo and Luke. And then obviously the tragedy of Carrie Fisher passing away. Obviously there was a level of, we probably are going to assume she's going to die in this as well, which isn't the filmmaker's fault. But just every element of it, I was like, well, I basically know, I would genuinely say 70% of everything that happened, I knew just by the trailers. And that for me really aggravated me. And I just, everything people have been complaining about the sequels being, which is copycats of the original trilogy and stuff, which I disagreed with. I think The Force Awakens definitely has obviously a lot of similarities. But I thought The Last Jedi really tread its own path. And I was like, no, this trilogy, it's going to be a bit like the prequels in the sense that it's going to start off a bit weaker, but it's going to kind of get strong. And the finale, let's hope it's going to be the big part. And then the trailer really took away. And I want to clarify, I was still excited by it, but a lot of my excitement went down, unfortunately, for that element.
It's interesting. You actually started getting into exactly what I wanted to ask you about your trailer reaction, because I felt somewhat similar. The Force Awakens built incredible amount of hype. The teasers and then the full trailer were very, very well done. And then we discussed also, the Last Jedi, which I thought was one of the most effective film trailers I've ever seen. Agreed. It's like just a combination of visuals and the music together just created such a tense trailer that you couldn't wait to explore this film. Honestly, when I saw The Rise of the Skywalker, there was an immediately mixed signals in it. And to me personally, it wasn't the fact that we're getting Palpatine, because to me, it was actually a possible potential prospect. Because wait, it was really exciting to see Ian McDarmid at the, May 4th at the celebration, then roll it again, and then they show the trailer. He's clearly so excited to be back in the film. And I said, well, okay, all right, is he going to be a Force Vision? How is it going to work out? I was still honestly excited for that part of the film. Believe it or not, I said, okay, how, if treated carefully, almost anything could be interesting in the film. And for me, it opened the windows like, So if anything is possible, then my next logical conclusion, the way I was interpreting the trailer in my mind, is what if they bring Luke back, like full swing? Like literally unapologetically. So like, oh, by the way, we didn't kill him, roll it back. And tons of fans would still be excited and happy for it, even though it's an obvious reaction to the reception of, the previous film. But when you see it, it honestly felt like the trailer is all over the place. It doesn't know exactly what statement it wants to make. It just felt like your typical cliche Hollywood, bigger and better. Oh, you think you knew who Rey is in episode 8? Well, you don't know, because she doesn't know, and there's still secrets to be found. This constant reliance on plot twists and secrets. I just reviewed the book from my channel, The Courtship of Princess Leia, and I was just to compare it to this modern filmmaking and storytelling to something that's from the 90s, is where stories didn't rely on these like plot twists and secrets and the kind of like plot machinations to make fans more excited and go and pay those admission tickets. That's what the trailer was to me. And I didn't know where the movie's going. And when they show at the end Finn and they're on the horses and they're riding on top of, the Star Destroyer and a whole bunch of them is coming out, I'm like, where are you going with this? Just the trailer and alone made me very like, I need to tone down my reservations, because I'm very open-minded. At the same time, if you're showing me something that goes two different routes, two separate directions, I don't know what to feel.
Yeah.
I wasn't jumping ahead of it. I wasn't trying to predict what the movie is going to be, because as we will discuss later, there were actually quite a few pleasant surprises for me in the film. So I wasn't
Yeah.
jumping ahead. I was just like, based on what I'm seeing right now, I am less excited than I was for Force Awakens, and I'm definitely less excited than I was for The Last Jedi.
Yeah, I agree. With the Palpatine thing, like there was a theory that I quite liked actually, which would have been maybe like they found the throne, and the throne of some sort was like a lot of Sith stuff in canon so far has been like living through an object or things like, I know that happened quite a lot in Legends, but like there's the Mask of Momin, which is in the Lando comic miniseries, but mainly in the Darth Vader series, the 2017 ones by Charles Soule. And if anyone wants to hear about them, go over to my channel because I tackled them and I finished them recently. Finished the Fortress Vader arc. So it's like Momin is a key part to Vader's castle being built and things. So it's a really interesting storyline. It's got this mask that's been kind of possessed by a Sith, and there's lots of things in Legends and a few things in canon, like in the Clone Wars series, Yoda goes and sees like this ghost of Bane because of him going on this journey in essence, and it's kind of, it seems like it's connected to this artifact in some way. So it's like all these little layers in the canon. I was like, okay, maybe Palpatine survived through that. Maybe he was experimenting with stuff and he's managed to catch his consciousness and he's trying to escape out of that. And I was like, that's quite a cool idea. Or maybe it was in the Darth Vader like melted helmet thing, because you see Rey and Kylo smash it in the trailer as well. And I was like, oh, maybe if that was it and he's not fully in it, that would be quite a cool thing when they build to it. But I did just kind of feel like, I agree with you, there were surprises when I saw the film, but I feel like instead of it being like Last Jedi Force Awakens, where it was like big, huge things, Han Solo dies and Snoke dies and these big like weighted elements. And then in that, it's like, oh, Palpatine's back. It's like, I would have rather they just kind of saved that bit. I know in the film he appears like immediately, but there are big plot elements that I would have rather they had not done, like with you say the horses running on, you saw all the starships in the background. I was like, okay, so there's going to be a giant fight now with loads of starships, and I was like, I know that's obviously going to happen in Star Wars, but I'd rather not know that exactly, if you know what I mean.
Also, Kathleen Kennedy talked about how they wanted to bring a closure to all of the Skywalker saga, maintaining the fact that, look, these 9 films are the Luke Skywalker saga, and thus it will end here. And to me, it honestly just felt like they were trying to justify Palpatine. They were trying to justify trying to tie in this trilogy, which in my opinion should have been completely different, into the Skywalker trilogy, because those are more popular films. And because they didn't spend enough time developing an idea that would stand on its own 2 legs and not rely on the Skywalker saga. Because look, we all, honestly, any casual to hardcore Star Wars fans knows where the Skywalker saga ends, and it's episode 6. There's nothing else you can extract from those characters. It's all, unless you do their children, which, they have Kylo Ren, but how is he connected to that family, where from the start of this new trilogy, he chooses to be not? He ostracizes himself from it? I don't know. Conceptually, I don't know where it was going, which it leads me into the next question, So we had this hype, we had this perception of what the film is going to be, and then we saw it. And perhaps in my case, I saw it 2 times. I'm about to see it a 3rd time after we have our conversation. You probably saw it a couple of times. Now that we spent 2 years pretty much to sit down and kind of digest the film, and we all have different opinions, I wanted to hear your personal take on what is the premise of the film? What is it really about? And has it succeeded at saying that?
Realistically, I think it's about redemption, and I think that's what the original trilogy was about. It was about going on a journey, hoping for the best, trying to be positive, even in insurmountable odds, trying your best and not going to the dark side and stuff, and persevering, and eventually you will succeed if people are telling you not to. So it's got this hopeful message, and it's about redemption, and it's got this whole very well done gradual build to a crescendo plot to the end of it and things. And I feel like because of the disjointed nature of the sequel trilogy, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker don't necessarily connect on the same level, so as a trilogy. But as a film in itself, I think it was trying a bit too hard in its message to mirror that of Return of the Jedi. It was very much like, there's this really evil man, and he wants to basically destroy everything. For some reason, he's got followers, and we all need to band together and beat him. And it's like, well, this is plot of every film ever, and you already did this. Like this is just any generic bland film. It's just there's a
Yeah.
bad person and we need to beat them. And I didn't get that feel because it felt like there are so many times where it was trying so hard to try and lie to us, like we'd even think for a moment that Rey would fall to the dark side. It was like there was just no stakes at all.
Mhm.
Like in Return of the Jedi, I feel like it was really subtle with Luke. It wasn't in your face. It was the first time you see him, he force chokes a Gamorrean guard. He's wearing all black. He's a bit more angry. He's more threatening to Jabba. He's got all these traits about him, but they don't go on about it. Then when he's at the end and he's got the choices, you see him trying to strike down the Emperor. You see these moments of his, and then he chooses not to go down that path. With Rey, it's just like, oh, she's been literally the most probably good pure character in the whole of the two films. You know, Poe's a bit selfish and reckless. Finn can just try and run away from responsibilities a little bit and things, which he does in The Last Jedi and stuff. Rose wasn't quite developed enough as a character because she wasn't in all three films. But Rey from the start has been someone who's moral, someone's good, who's always been like the moral pinnacle of the good guys in air quotes, aside from
Yeah.
arguably Princess Leia. So as soon as they go, oh, well, she might be bad, it's like,
Yeah.
what? No, there's no hint of that at all. So I feel like there are certain plot threads that they tried to make you feel a certain way, or maybe tried to teach a lesson, but realistically, it just fell to we're just kind of doing the redemption thing again, but with
So it
Ben.
didn't succeed for you.
I think what they were trying to do, they succeeded. I just think, in a sense of, if they were just doing the redemption thing, I just think with the other elements, all the other sort of stuff fell to the sidelines of what they were trying to achieve. I think if you ask JJ or other people, they probably think that in broad strokes they did achieve what they wanted,
Yeah.
which to them was, I think, a bit more surface level. They didn't think like we want to do these necessarily massive plots. They were kind of like, we want this to happen with Ben, we want this to happen with Palpatine, and we want this to happen with Rey. Anything else is second. And I think so for them, they feel like they succeeded. But after it got released and a lot of the fans who were more into it saw it, I think maybe they're not as much.
Yeah, you
What
know,
about yourself?
I also caught some of its themes, and remember we also talked about the prequels, and I expressed how I think George Lucas's heart was in the right place. This very much, I think, the idea comes forward specifically for the Episode 9. The heart of the filmmakers was in the right place. It's there's clearly themes in the film, like the return of the Skywalker family back to the good side. Right, starts with Vader, he goes to the bad side. Then we go to Luke, who kind of goes through this journey, and we find out in this new trilogy he also has disillusionment because another Skywalker went to the dark side, and now there's redemption. The family is coming home to the good side. There was this idea that your bloodline doesn't define you. In that sense, I felt I was a lot more lenient with Rey, even though she's this innocent beacon of hope. It felt like they're also portraying her that she's this volatile element, that she has this raw power. She doesn't know what to do. It's like also an abandoned kid, something that Kylo Ren could relate to. He feels abandoned, she feels abandoned, and both of them are these rogue elements which could go either or. The weapon could misfire this direction and that one. They could both go potentially bad. So I thought what was really effective and worked in the film is who will come out of this. Like there were points where in the film where I believed that she might turn to the dark side. There were points in the film where I believed that Ben will never be redeemed. So that thing I felt was to a certain degree organically done, and it came through. So I felt on those principles, what the filmmakers were trying to do with the money and time and effort and all the rewrites to accomplish, they succeeded. To which extent, it's open for interpretation. You and I will also criticize the film's, flaws and so forth. But I felt what they were going for. Okay, it's not a high mark, but I can't say that the film completely took me off track and I don't know what this movie is about. I do know. Even I would say I would defend prequels any day of the week, and I can't call them terrible movies. They're not. No Star Wars film to me is like a complete just shallow popcorn actioner that you chew your popcorn and you go home. They all have something to offer. Sometimes they don't succeed at it, right? So there is a story in the film, and then how it's delivered could be different things. Me, as somebody who's not a jaded Star Wars hater, I could say that I find personally the prequels are very flawed films, and still find things to like. I could look at this film and say that it's also flawed and still find things. I don't have to reach. I don't have to convince myself. I could honestly say to myself, this movie is not very well done because reasons, right? But I think there's some jewel moments in it.
Yeah, no, I would be inclined to agree. I mean, I want to clarify to anyone, I am going to unfortunately be quite negative in this episode, but I do enjoy The Rise of Skywalker. I think it is a good movie. I want to clarify that, but I don't want Star Wars just to be good. I want Star Wars to be excellent, and that's, for me, that's how I feel. And I know the prequels didn't do a great job, but for me, Revenge of the Sith is my favorite. I don't think it's the best made film, but I feel like how weak the elements of the Phantom Menace and elements of Attack of the Clones were, Revenge of the Sith kind of made up for it. And I felt like with the sequels, I was kind of hoping for that. I was like, okay, Force Awakens was too similar. Last Jedi was maybe too different. Let's get what we learned from the two and make a film that's going to blow everyone's mind. Let's do like the best Star Wars film ever. And for me, they didn't. But I want to just clarify to listeners, I'm not a sequel hater. I like all the Star Wars films, and I do really like Rise of Skywalker. It was just, I think, of all the films, the biggest disappointment to me. And although I've watched it, I think I've watched it 3 times in total. I think I still do enjoy it. I want to
Mike, very quickly, just wanted your thoughts on this. Did this movie, in retrospect, alter the way you view episodes 7 and 8, or you still maintain with your initial response how you liked them first?
It made me like episode 8 more. If I'm honest, because when episode 7 and 8 were out, I enjoyed them both equally.
Yeah.
And I thought, one's a bit more safe and things, but the introduction of the characters is excellent. Well, The Last Jedi has some really exciting, amazing bits I like more, but it also has a few moments in that I could do without. So for me, they were quite even. And then when Rise of Skywalker came out, which for me is a lot more like The Force Awakens, which is the much more safe option, then I realized I want my Star Wars a bit more risky. If I wanted safe Star Wars, I'd go back and watch the original trilogy. I want things to be a bit different and push the boundaries. I don't want Disney to be scared of trying new things in the worry that people aren't going to like them, because I think Last Jedi was a triumph. So yeah, it changed my opinion only on the basis it made me realize how much I enjoyed the risk taking of Last Jedi in retrospect.
That's interesting. I want to talk about Palpatine, not just as a character, but as a story device, right? Because I want your thoughts on Palpatine's return as the mastermind of all the Star Wars trilogies, right? Of all the numbered Star Wars sequels, this sequel trilogy now maintains, because the way that it was constructed, whether it was fully thought out or not. J.J. Abrams somewhere stated that supposedly him and Lawrence Kasdan thought that they knew they will bring Palpatine right from the beginning in 2015, which I think is total BS. I don't believe a word of it. Not that the JJ is a bad guy. I'm not trying to crucify him. I'm just saying that's BS. That's an artist trying to justify his piece of work and say like, we always knew this. So thoughts on Palpatine as a mastermind behind all these trilogies. Do you think it's justified to bring him in and say, well, if it's the end of the Skywalker saga, we also need the Skywalker's greatest villain, who is Palpatine?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, if I just look at it in sort of an in-universe criticism as opposed to a story device at this moment, so I think if you look at it in broad strokes, it's like, that was great. Or no, here's a better way of doing it. If you look at it while you're solely looking at Palpatine and don't take anything else into consideration, it makes perfect sense, because Palpatine has always been a planner. Even in Legends days, he basically did something very, very similar. He transferred his essence into a clone body and things. So it's like, that's kind of already been done. It's kind of been expected. But even if we just look at the films, the prequel is about Palpatine planning everything. And if you go into the Clone Wars, it's him just pitting two sides against each other. He's got this whole grand plan. It works for ages. And he only messed up really with one thing in episode 6, in theory. He didn't have enough faith in he underestimated the rebels, basically, and underestimated Vader. So that's his greatest problem. You go into the trilogies then, and the problem is that regardless of whether or not JJ did or did not think that Palpatine would be in it, I imagine he had maybe a thought in the back of his head thinking, maybe if I write another one, I might do it. Or if I have to do the whole trilogy, maybe that's where I'd go. But there is no evidence in The Force Awakens at all to Palpatine. And the same with Last Jedi. And the thing is, one of the reasons this film aggravates me in a lot of ways is that The Last Jedi, I find, it didn't change. It didn't go back to what The Force Awakens was and tweak things about it and say this is
Yeah.
wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. It built off it. It just went in a slightly different direction. And I just felt that this was quite reductive. It just went, oh, there's certain elements of where Last Jedi went that we just don't agree with. You know, the family lineage thing. Rey has to be involved with all these people for some reason. It's like, I liked her not knowing her parents. With like elements of Palpatine just controlling everything behind the scenes, it was just like, well, Snoke sucked, but what was good about The Last Jedi is it proved that Snoke wasn't the star. He wasn't the main point. And now that Palpatine's behind it, it's like, oh, it was just a step in Palpatine's plan. It's like, but that just takes away more from Kylo Ren as a character. That just takes away because Palpatine planned it all again. And it feels like if you look at Palpatine, it would make sense in universe. So I accept it. I'm not one to just defy it and say it didn't happen. I accept that it happened. It makes sense from the in-universe perspective, he would. But when you start looking at things in a bit more detail, especially Force Awakens and Last Jedi, it doesn't add up. If the last one didn't have him in it, it wouldn't be like, oh, well, Last Jedi didn't make any sense. It'd just be like, oh, Snoke was just an old dude who could use the Force and got killed. Like, don't need him to be connected to Palpatine. So in that sense of him in universe, I get it. I just think that when you start looking at it under a magnifying glass, it doesn't really work in the same way. I'm interested in what you think, actually, of that.
So Palpatine, as you know, some of our audience who are listening might know, has returned before, right? With a Dark Empire comic book. He has returned in the Throne trilogy of original books. Palpatine found different devices of create cloning facilities and godforsaken, planets, and then basically transplant his spirit into a younger vessel of himself. I never liked that concept. I recognize the impulse for audience to return to the stories that they love and cherish and see a continuation of that. That's why I just started on my second book with Dune. That's why, I'll go back to Warhammer 40K, because once you experience something, it makes you feel special, like it's great, whether it's gritty, like for, the grim dark genre, like Warhammer 40K, you want to come back to it and relive it again, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to the villains in any of those stories is once you create something great, you only diminish its value if you keep repeating it and reusing it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you create a villain and you chop his head, the axe swings down, don't ever use them again. That's why I fell out with a lot of comic books. I used to be an avid Marvel and DC comic book reader. When I managed a comic book store here in New York City in the Bronx. I fell off. I'm like, oh man, how many times can you reboot Marvel Universe? How many times can you redo Civil War with like little twists here and there? How many times can that happen? I don't want to see Wolverine in Weapon X 25,000 times. It's an awesome something, right? The villains that he fights are great, but I don't want to see it again. And I never understood why this trilogy needed to rely on him like a crutch. And I'll go even further. I will always say that when you take the prequels into consideration here as well, I did not feel that it needed to rely on Palpatine as a schemer, as a plotter. Perhaps for some people, it's a very compelling plot device, and people say, well, I like that. I like the deeper layer of, machinations, how he was there all along. I think you could have very successfully tell a story with younger Anakin, who we meet from the beginning of Phantom Menace as a young, eager man who is not a slave. He's just as Luke. He's bored on this Tatooine, and perhaps the Clone Wars are already happening, and we don't know who's behind it, right? So Clone Wars are happening, and young Anakin is there, and by the end of that trilogy, what seduces him to the dark side is this shadow that comes at the end, who will eventually turn in the Emperor that we know. So in that sense, the trilogy would not depend on Palpatine, but still have the chance to introduce him, because obviously prequels have to lead to a story that is already pre-existing, right?
Yeah.
So I felt like both trilogies overused him too much. That's why I didn't like the Dark Plagueis novels. But I did enjoy Palpatine in the books as a standalone. I'm like, okay, that's what they're doing. If you keep an open mind to it, it's kind of story of and of itself is pretty cool. So yeah, to me, bringing Palpatine back just did not work based on that. No matter how effectively they would have used him.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, and this is obviously this is one of the good things of us discussing things with different opinions. For me, Palpatine works incredibly well in the prequels. I love him in the prequels, but I want to clarify, because I like him in the prequels, I don't want him elsewhere. I feel like we've got enough Palpatine. We got his rise to power, and then we got his fall. That's it. We don't need everything else. Like, no stories that take place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope are about Palpatine. He pops up every now and then to say like
Yeah.
6 or 7 words of exposition to Vader in a few comics. And in like Star Wars Rebels, he had like a minuscule amount. It was in like 2 or 3 episodes. He had like a tiny amount to do. And that's fine because he's obviously there, but he's not in the action. He's levels and levels and levels above everyone else, controlling things on such a massive scheme that he doesn't get involved with all the small stuff. So no stories explore Palpatine in that era in the canon. And I'm happy with that because no one that I know has been like, although there may be some people who Palpatine's their favorite character, but I don't know anyone who's like, oh, you know what I want? I want a whole Palpatine movie. No
Yeah.
one says that. It's just because that's not what you want him for. And this just felt like, let's have Palpatine in it even more. And it's like, but who wanted this? You did it in Legends. A lot of people didn't like it much in Legends.
Yeah.
And then you're doing it again in the sequel trilogy. It's already quite up and down. And if we go into like him as a plot device, I don't want, like, I know a lot of people worked very hard on this film, and I want to clarify, I think it is a good movie. I don't want to disparage or be mean to anyone who made this, but I just think it was such a lazy choice. I just think it was the most boring thing you can do.
Safe is the word.
Exactly. It's just, and one of the biggest problems I had with Palpatine as a plot device is, for me personally, it completely ruined Kylo Ren / Ben Solo's redemption. It just completely ruined it. And I don't know if you have some questions specifically about that, because I can pause this train of thought if you want me to, if we're going to go on there, or I can keep on going.
I'm pretty sure we'll get more into Kylo Ren. It's actually, you're sort of like reading my mind. It's like where I want to take this conversation to. But I just wanted to bring as a perfect example the Planet of the Apes remake, because in that trilogy there is a common thread that it's apes versus the civilization versus the humans, but each movie introduced a new villain. Same here. You could have the same principle that the main threat is coming from this empire or the imperial remnant in the future, but each time you could have a different villain. Just like Star Wars Legends books do very successfully, is when one villain becomes tiresome, they go to something else. Hey, there's a rogue element here. There's an admiral here who is not very successful. He's a complete dummy, but he still has a lot of resources. They play around with those ideas. Even when Zahn kills Thrawn, right, in the original trilogy, there's 2 more books, the Hand of Thrawn duology, that comes out. That kind of plays around with the idea of Thrawn coming back, but he really honors the character, says, no, if I killed him, he stays dead. Yeah. And, that was very admirable, and I thought that the Planet of the Apes trilogy pulled it off masterfully. It didn't try to up the ante.
Yeah, and I want to add with the Palpatine thing, I also feel like not only does it diminish Kylo Ren, but I also find that it actually diminishes Vader's sacrifice in Episode 6.
Yeah.
And that's one of, if not the greatest moment in all of Star Wars, is when you have that moment, where Luke and Vader are fighting, and then Luke chooses to throw a saber away, and then, I know the scene, it takes place over like 15 minutes of footage because it's split with, the rebellion battle, etc. But that whole scene in one go, it's just incredible, and it's the finale of of Episode 6. It makes it so good. And you just go, oh, Vader did that, yeah. And I mean, obviously, it did cause the events that happened. It made Palpatine disappear into space for 30 odd years, which obviously one can argue, okay, well, that Rey and stuff couldn't have happened if Vader hadn't sacrificed. But I just feel like it took away more than it put in, if you know what I mean.
It's if it's not safe, then another way to describe Palpatine's return, it's like, one thing that I felt was very annoying in this entire trilogy is like these adults, Filoni, J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, all of them together playing around in this Star Wars sandbox, but in some instances treating it like a toy, like a prop, and you put like, oh, look, we're going to playing on fans' nostalgia. I feel the same way about Luke Skywalker's return in Mandalorian, the way I do about Palpatine in this movie. It's a prop. It's something to tease in front of the fans' eyes, to say, oh, you're going to be excited about this, right? Because you love them in those movies. I don't like that. It like you said, diminishes the strength of the storytelling. Moving on, let's talk about the cast now. I want to start off with a journey of Rey and where she begins in this franchise and in this trilogy, where she ends. How did you like the conclusion of her journey in this film?
I thought it was all right. I thought it was fairly predictable. This is one of my biggest problems with this film. Once again, it's quite predictable. It's like what I kind of wanted to happen is something I knew would never happen. I wanted Rey to die and for Kylo to go to the good side, and then for him to have to deal with the repercussions of him causing all this chaos and him, being able to do all that, and I'll get into more of that later. But Rey, I was like, I doubt she's gonna die. I was like, in my heart, I think she's probably Ben's gonna die and save her somehow, and she's gonna live on. The fact that she calls herself Rey Skywalker, I don't really care. I'm like, okay. It didn't, when I saw it in the cinema, I was like, it makes sense for me that Disney as a committee would decide to call her that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It's a good way to erase the Palpatine lineage, I suppose. She wouldn't want to call herself Rey Palpatine. It made sense for me. It didn't make me go, yeah. And it didn't make me go, like, I hate it. It was just meh. Okay, that's what they did. Her journey throughout the films, I think the first two did an excellent job. I think in this one, there was the bit with her and Chewie where she shot out the lightning and stuff. And I did quite like that the first time I watched it, but it just didn't really feel necessary. It just felt like it was only there to really make people half cry that Chewie was gone for like 5 minutes, and then he comes back, and you're just like, that part just felt like it was trying to feed into this, is she going to go bad or not? And I appreciate what you said, that you feel like it did, but I knew they weren't going to do it, because the problem is she's based as this hero, and it's still generally aimed at kids. Unfortunately, like, I'm not saying Star Wars shouldn't be aimed at kids, but like, generally speaking, there are so many little girls that are looking up to Rey. If in the end she turned full heel, went bad, killed loads of people, and then died, it would have made so many people upset and annoyed. They would never have done that. So the whole time I was like, they're not going to go ahead with this. They're being too heavy-handed. Because you saw Dark Rey in the trailer, I knew she wasn't going to be Dark Rey. So with those elements in mind, I kind of knew where it was going. I don't know how I feel about the end where she was like on Tatooine and she says, I'm Rey Skywalker and buries the lightsabers. I was like, this feels to me kind of fan servicey. I was like, it feels like almost like a post-credit scene in a way.
Yeah.
But not adding anything. I was like, it just, once she kind of beat Palpatine in Exegol, her Rey's whole journey, even when she got there, I was just like, yeah, she's going to beat Palpatine. It's going to be all glorious. I quite liked the bit with the voices and the Jedi and stuff, and all the Jedi living in her and whatnot. That was quite cool. But as a whole, I just think with this film is one of the problems, is that all of the characters' journeys in this are either boring or predictable. Apart from one, which is Hux's, which I have many thoughts about. But it's with hers, I just thought it was going exactly where I could have told you it was going in episode 7.
Yeah.
If you asked me in episode 8, I'd have been a bit more, maybe. But yeah, for me, it was just quite too linear, too clear. And it didn't ever feel like it had the struggle that Luke did, weirdly enough. Although it kept going on about her going dark side, I feel like Luke's struggle in episode 6, to me, showed, like, over the 3 films even, it felt to me like Luke had done a lot more than Rey had.
Yeah.
Like, he'd come a lot longer from him at the start of the film, who's basically a whiny little kid who is quite annoying. And he gradually, throughout the film, then episode 5, he thinks he can take on Vader. He's a bit headstrong and he gets beaten. And then by 6, he's in the nice middle ground. He is truly embodiment of a Jedi. Yeah. He does all the right things. Rey, from the moment you meet her, is an incredibly moral person. She's not annoying, which is rare for the protagonists of Star Wars, because Anakin in the prequels and then Luke in the originals for the first couple films especially. And you've got her. She wasn't annoying. She was really cool. She was nice. She was pretty good with the Force, like, gradually, but she was pretty good with it. She generally learned her lessons and whatnot. And the only time she defied her master in Last Jedi was when she was in the right. So there were so many elements where she was just ahead of the curve of Luke. So by the end of the film, when it's like, I didn't feel like she learned or grew that much, because she was pretty spot on from the start, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I have somewhat different thoughts. I thought that her particular plot line is, in this film, is a rough landing. It's a landing that's like, but it does land. There are certain aspects of her which I think are undeniably not good for the character, like calling her anything, either Skywalker or Palpatine, because I sort of fan-wished that she would be Luke's daughter when she finds him on Acto, but she ended up not being there. And I really rolled with the idea, like, oh, so she's not anyone's daughter. Interesting.
That's what I liked.
Right? I think that worked the most for the character. But what I really enjoyed about The Rise of the Skywalker is that her journey was a little bit different from Luke's. If Luke's struggle was choosing between the dark and the light side, with her, she also raises these questions in the Force Awakens and the Last Jedi. But I felt that the tension of the character was a lot more in her trying to find her place, who she is. And then when she finds Kylo Ren, she connects with him on the premise of he's lost as I am.
Mm.
So that's their connection. And her investing all of her energies into restoring this young man, bringing him back to the good side, I felt was done pretty successfully within the span of this film. I like it.
Yeah.
So if you look at
I
it
see
this
what you
way,
mean.
right, I would agree that she may be a lot more pristine, clean character in terms of choosing the good versus bad, right? It was kind of like teased through some artwork where she's like in this black, I'm like, she's not going dark side. But I felt that she was in peril whether her mission of bringing him back will or will not succeed. I honestly, till the end, did not know if Ben is ever going to turn. I'm like, what if they go the more daring route and keep him bad? And she'll
That's what I
never be
wanted.
able to. It was a guessing game for me. And when at the end she does succeed, I did feel that, for me personally, the stakes were just barely enough there for me to care. I
Yeah.
did care for her. But moving on now, she is very much connected to Kylo. And before we talked about, obviously their connection to one another, how did you feel about Kylo's healing process, his transformation, in comparison also with Anakin Skywalker in the prequels?
Hmm. So if I say on an actor's level, I think Adam Driver did a stellar job, because even when he turns to Ben Solo, his walk is different, his run is different, his every single thing about his body language and everything is all completely different. He does such a good job. Like, even if you'd not seen the plot, the middle part where you see kind of Ben, talk to the memory of Han and change in a sense and throw his lightsaber away. If you didn't have that element and you just saw the first scene with Ben with Kylo when he's going to Exegol compared to that Ben Solo, obviously the parallel scene where he goes there as Ben, acting phenomenal. I thought it was excellent. I really liked Ben Solo as a character.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed that a lot. When compared to like Anakin's turn in prequels, I think Adam Driver did a better job. I think the character changing was probably done in a somewhat better way, still a bit rocky in certain ways, but I like the imagery of, if you watch the Clone Wars, Anakin's turn makes a lot more sense. If you just keep it to the movies, Anakin's turn seems a bit quick. There are some quite clear not quite clear. There are some parallels where you've got Mace Windu against Palpatine, and then it goes through the whole sort of, he says, it's not the Jedi way, and Mace Windu's like, I don't care, and goes to kill him anyway. And that kind of mirrors the earlier thing where Palpatine was saying to Anakin when he's killing Dooku, oh, Anakin says it's not the Jedi way, and Palpatine says the same thing, so we realize the Jedi and the Sith even. That's fine. It's still a bit quick. With Kylo, you had him literally like die, like stab through the heart, and then Rey healed him. I really like that imagery. I think that did it for the audience in a way that the prequels didn't quite manage.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the visual element and the not explicitly saying, my name is now Ben Solo, in a more so way of, he throws the lightsaber away. He's literally killed and healed by Rey. He's left there to himself. He talks to Han. You've got that parallel there where he's, he kind of says to his dad what he almost wants to have said instead of killing him. So you've got all those layers to it that I enjoyed his turn more than I thought I would. I thought it was quite predictable. But I think compared to what they did with the prequels, I think that the transformation was done better. I have some other thoughts on that, but I didn't know if you want to chime in at that point.
Let's hold on just a minute, because I want to get into the segment of the story of the film, but we'll touch on deeper on like Kylo and Rey and their connection and all that jazz. We'll get more into it. But we have other two cast members that are kind of we're forgetting in our conversation. We also have, out of the new cast, Finn and Poe. What's going on with them in this film?
Not a lot. Let's be honest here. They're the two probably most unused characters in the film, which is quite upsetting. Apart from Rose, I'd argue.
I like your very dispassionate answer. Like, not a lot.
But for two characters that from the start, like Kylo Ren's always been my favorite, but from two characters who, especially Finn at the start, I was like, you've got someone who uses a lightsaber. You've got someone who's got like a moral compass. He goes against the grain. You've got all these cool elements to him, and he's learning. For me, it's like he's trying to find his way in the universe. Yeah. Him and Rey work together so well in the way that she's force sensitive, but he's not. He's trying to find his way. He's been in the big wide world in the scary elements. She's been really isolated. They really work together. And then for some reason, obviously in Last Jedi, they kind of just veered completely off and weren't even interacting in the entire film, apart from right at the very end, which is fine because I like that film and they want to do what they want to do. But then in this film again, it was just like they barely interact, even though they keep making this weird connection. Like Finn keeps going, Rey, I need to tell you something. And it's like, I thought he was going to tell her he loved her, but apparently according to J.J. Abrams, he said no, it's because he feels the Force. I'm like, He could have just said that. Why is he not telling Poe when they're in those sinking sand bits? Why is he not just saying, oh, I think I can hear the Force calling? And then they could have Poe could have said something that would have mirrored what Han Solo said in the original trilogy. It would have been a nice little nod there or something. But it made it feel like it was going one way when it wasn't. Finn was overly obsessed with Rey like he always was. And Finn had the potential to have such a cool character and such weight. And he just kind of got pushed to the edge. And it was like, he got to interact with the other group of stormtroopers who had defected. They heard his story. And I liked that element, but they just didn't go into it enough. That was probably one of the coolest ideas. I was like, oh, that's like a rebellion within the Empire. That's, even though that's in books and stuff quite a lot, and in Star Wars Rebels a bit. In the films, you didn't get to see that. It was people in the Empire and people were in the rebellion, and there wasn't really much middle ground. And I thought, oh, cool, they're going to go into that a little bit. And I was like, oh, here's 2 sentences, and then we're just going to be in the background for the rest of the movie. Yeah. So for him, he was weak for me, annoyingly, and I like Finn as a character. I'd love to meet Finn as a person in Star Wars. I think I'd get on with him well. Poe, he started off, he did the light speed skipping, which I thought was awesome. I thought it was a very cool, exciting idea that I hadn't seen in Star Wars before, and they just didn't use it again. I was like, okay.
I couldn't stand it.
Really? Well, I'd love to ask you about that. But I liked it because it was something different. Mm-hmm. And I was like, because it was one of the early scenes, you've got the X-School scene, you've got the light skipping scene. I was like, they're doing what I hope. They're doing The Last Jedi. They're doing loads of crazy, weird stuff that they haven't really done. And then, after half an hour, they stopped doing that and decided for Force healing, nothing was new. But that's a whole nother thing, Force healing. So with Poe, him and Finn were just kind of someone for Rey to sort of somewhat bounce off when she was wandering around that desert planet and they found Lando and stuff. They would just kind of, you could almost have any character in the world saying their lines and it wouldn't have made any difference.
Yeah.
And I think that was my biggest problem with him, is that Poe is such a big character. He's meant to kind of be the Han Solo of the trilogy, and he barely says anything, and he's not really that funny either. In The Force Awakens, there's a line that I know you don't like, but when he talks to Kylo Ren, he's like, who talks first? You talk first, I talk first. I love that line. I love the humor that Poe has. I love he's a bit too, as they say in the Last Jedi, he's like a flyboy. He just wants to blow stuff up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I liked about Han Solo. He's a lovable kind of a rogue in a way. That's what I liked about Poe. And Poe wasn't in it that much. He was just kind of, he was the leader of the squads, and he was flying around shooting stuff, but for him and Finn, I just feel like there was almost no dialogue they had that couldn't have been swapped between them almost and could have been said by any other character. And that upset me the most, I think, where it's just like you're focusing so much on Rey and Kylo to certain degrees of success. And these other 2 characters that were so important in the last 2 films, especially in The Force Awakens, they've just been left to the wayside. And it just bothered me quite a bit with that.
Yeah, I think there's an argument that some fans make that there is the film is not bad. It's just it should have been 2 movies. There's enough plot for 2 movies in there, and they didn't split it, and they had to shorten a lot of stuff, and that's why I felt like Poe and Finn didn't get their time, not even to shine, but even to be participating in the story. To me, they only worked as far as the merry friends are going on an adventure, almost like the 3 Musketeers, where I did enjoy the adventurous aspect of the film, where they're looking for this dagger, which will lead them to this planet, which has the fallen, Death Star, which has the holocron that will lead them to Exegol. I felt it was a very interesting moment pulled from Indiana Jones and put it into this movie. So in that context, they all work together. They're making comments like, oh, they can fly now, this, they're escaping the stormtroopers. A lot of exciting stuff is happening with them when they're together because Rey's there. You take Rey out of the picture and you don't know who these guys are, right? If you watch them together, the interactions, you don't know. Same with Lando. I'm like, he's there to have like one teachable moment and tell him like, hey, this is how we fought. This is what we made. Really? Lando? It's like you look at Billy D. Williams, who's over 80 years old. He looks magnificent in that movie. Why isn't it like if Leia, Carrie Fisher has passed away and they cobbling together all the footage they could to put in this film, which we could talk later on. I thought it was very successful with what they did with the footage that they had.
I agree.
Very heartfelt, very meaningful. CGI-wise, the work was brilliant. But I'm like, if you're putting Leia there and she's also passing the torch in a way, and she's also is gone, maybe you have one patriarch who kind of like stays over from the older days of the rebellion and like, okay, the saga is over, but you can always rely on Lando to be there and, come and helping hand if in case things happen, right?
Yeah.
There was so much opportunity, and like, okay, so we're also not getting Knights of Ren again. Can we just like completely forget about them and have like 5-10 more minutes with Lando Calrissian? This is Lando. To me, Star Wars was never about 3 heroes. It was always about 4 heroes. Lando is just as pivotal and important as the rest of them. He pulls their asses right under from Vader. He's like, the rebellion can go on because I came out and I had a switch of heart and I helped you guys.
Yeah.
We could
I
talk
love
about
Lando.
we could talk about the heroes all day long. I feel like you have something to say about Lando. Let's hear it.
With Lando, I was going to say, with him I really liked the balance of his character in the original trilogy. I thought he added a good weight to them, and especially in Return of the Jedi, like he's the only, like, him and Han have a really good camaraderie, and he's like the only other person who owned the Falcon, at that time. So you've got his skills, and he's so suave, and he's such a cool character in so many ways, and he's layered. I like that. He's not just I'm good because I'm good all the time. He had that moment in Cloud City. So you've got all these layers to him. I love Lando. I think he's excellent. And the comic season is really cool as well. His relationship with Lobot is great. And, Donald Glover's was great in Solo. He's one of the highlights for me for Solo. And then Billy D. Williams is so charismatic and so brilliant. He could have, as you say, I feel like he should have been in this film like Leia was in the first two. I feel like he should have been right at the front. I feel like he should have been the person leading. Leia should have taken a bit more of a backseat, kind of done what they did already, but have her just with Rey. And then go, look, we found Lando. He's been trapped somewhere for ages, unable to get out. But instead it was like, Lando, why are you here? Oh, I just don't fly anymore. It's like, you don't fly anymore. Okay, well, in the trailer, we saw you flying the Millennium Falcon. So everyone in the cinema knows not only you're going to fly because it's a Star Wars film, but we've already seen you before the announcement of you being in this film was you in the Falcon flying it. So why you have that line, I don't know. I know trailers are made after the film, I want to clarify.
Yeah.
But like, him having that line, I don't fly anymore. You're like, why even put this in there? Why just say I'm really tired? I was taking a break. I've been stuck. I took a bit of a break and I got stuck here. That all makes sense. That all works. Just being like, yeah, I don't fly anymore. You don't? No, but the next time you'll see me, I'll be flying with no explanation at all as to why I am, apart from you guys needed me. So, well, we've needed you for the last year plus. Where have you been? Oh, I've just been chilling on this desert planet, really, just doing my thing. It's like, there's no, for a character that has got so much cool stuff you could draw from him and so much that he could have done. And Billy D. Williams being like, when he was announced in the trailer, I was like, we're going to get so much Lando. He wasn't in The New Hope, but he was in Empire and Return of the Jedi. So in this one, let's have him have his big moment. I thought Solo was like a tease because he was in Solo quite a lot. I was like, here we go. And then it was like, yeah, you get 10 lines of dialogue. He could have been swapped out for Wedge Antilles. And obviously Wedge was in it for one line. I love Wedge. But Wedge could have easily just done everything Lando did.
Yeah.
And it would have probably made a bit more sense for him to be going around the galaxy of Luke than Lando. Although I want to, there's a book coming out that's going to delve into that. I'm excited to hear that. But it's just like, Wedge going with him would have made more sense in the story. And all the lines he had could have made more sense in certain ways. But they just, once again, they were like, we need to have Lando in this film, but we haven't thought of a plot for him. Don't worry, we'll have Billy D. Williams smiling a lot and have 5 lines of dialogue, and he'll fly the Falcon at some point. And it's just like another wasted opportunity for me.
Such a hugely wasted opportunity, yeah. And like seeing Lando and the pilot. Oh my God, I'm losing my
a Wedge or Chewie?
Wedge and Antilles as two of these war dogs together. Like, hey kids, let us show you how it's done.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask your thoughts on the legacy characters. Obviously we have the Han's very surprising scene and moment when with Ben. We have Luke's scene with Rey where he comes back, the Obi-Wan Kenobi 2.0 version, right? And then we have, of course, the Leia's passing, and later on we see them as twins, the Skywalker twins as ghosts. Which one of those scenes was the most meaningful to you?
For me, actually, I would say I loved the Luke and Leia's flashback scene. I really, where they were doing the Jedi training, I really enjoyed that. Although I think it opens more questions than answers, and that's probably one of my big problems with this film is at the end of it, you haven't had many things solved. You have more questions than when you started with, which should not be how the finale of a trilogy and a saga should go. But I thought that Han scene, when I first saw it, I didn't like it as much because I thought it should have been Anakin's Force Ghost. I thought that'd have been different and have worked a bit better. But I do like the parallel. I see why they did it. And I think for a wider audience, more people would have been happy to see Han Solo rather than us going, so it's a memory that he can see really well. Okay. Why did he throw his lightsaber away? Why couldn't he have cleansed it? That'd have been a really cool thing to see. Like he turned it back to green or something. That'd have been cool. But no, he throws it away so he hasn't got a weapon. Okay, not the best thing to do when you're about to go fight Palpatine, is it? And then you've got the Han Solo. Yeah, he was all right. I was like, I would have probably preferred Anakin as a Force ghost, but maybe a lot of fans wouldn't have. With Leia, I thought, as you said, for going into the film knowing Carrie Fisher passed away, I feel like knowing that, you can see it in the film a little bit. But if you didn't know that, if you showed a child this film, it's not obvious enough that they've just patched together footage. I think from what they had, they did a really, really good job, to be honest. And I think they showed it very respectfully, and I really enjoyed that. With Luke, he was basically in it as much as I thought he was going to be. I like the end bit, Luke and Leia hugging each other's Force ghosts. It raises the question once again about who can do Force ghosts. In the Clone Wars, it was kind of like, okay, well, Qui-Gon had to train. He didn't get all the way, so he has to kind of half-train Yoda and Obi-Wan. That's part of Obi-Wan's training on Tatooine. And then the three of them can do it. Oh, Vader can do it. Okay, well, he figured it out at some point. That's fine. Okay. Oh, but also Leia can do it. And she had like she got to the end of her Jedi training with Luke, stopped, has used Force powers intermittently, and suddenly knows to be a Force ghost. It's like, okay, then we'll just keep not knowing how Force ghosting wasn't a thing before Qui-Gon, and now suddenly everyone can do it. But putting that aside, I like that little scene. I thought Leia was great. I thought Luke was all right. I thought it was kind of a bit of a middle finger to Last Jedi, where Rey kind of went on. When Rey went on Acto, I was just like, this is a pointless scene. Why is Rey giving up now? You're halfway through the final movie in the saga. No one's going to believe she's going to sit on an island for the rest of the movie. It's just not going to happen. It didn't. She got his X-Wing, which was cool, but I feel like she should have gone there to kind of call to him to be like, I need some guidance. And then him appear and have generally the same conversation. I didn't want her throwing the lightsaber away and setting fire to the ship she was on, and then him going, a Jedi doesn't throw his lightsaber away. It's like, you literally did this. You literally did it. You should have some sort of, I know they're on the nose saying that specifically because he did that, but I find that although I enjoyed the scene with them and it was happy seeing Luke again, I just feel like the way Rey got there, being like, I'm going to do what Luke did, even though in the last film it showed he made the complete wrong decision. I proved him wrong, and now I'm just going to go do it. It's like, what, because you had a little Force vision about yourself being bad, and you shot lightning and thought you killed Chewie when you didn't. It's like,
I have thoughts on that scene.
So although I liked all the legacy characters, their performances in it, I think most of them, unfortunately, once again with this film, when you start looking at it a lot more, either things I feel like could have somewhat been done better for a lot of the case, or they just raise a few more questions than they kind of need to, even though I enjoyed them.
Yeah. It's one scene that stood out to me the most, which I felt was done brilliantly. And if it wasn't for the film's insane pacing, and if there was just preparedness a little bit more for that scene, it would have been amazing. First, when Rey wounds Kylo and he's there dying, and this transformation, kind of very symbolic death and rebirth of the hero.
Yes.
And it's at that precise moment where Leia reaches out to him through space and time. She's my son, and like she's being a mother first and foremost. I get goosebumps just but like thinking about this scene. And she gives her last breath for him. And the only time when her body is allowed to pass into the Netherrealm, when he's fully healed. And so it's Leia coming at one side, it's like, son, come back. And then Han Solo from the other side, like, son, come back. And I saw that scene not as something that he sees. There's nothing literal about that scene. He might as well just could have been standing there and thinking about his dad. But visually, they needed to show that little touch.
Yeah.
I was surprised that Harrison Ford came back. I was like, that is one rare instance where this is not just a BS, cameo. It really makes sense in all of the scenes, like, calculating for maximum effect in the scene. It's a very, very precise science. And he just nails it in this part. You could blame the rest of the film of being like, having very hectic pacing, but here he puts him in. I'm like, oh man. Like I felt Carrie Fisher's passing all over again. It was like a bleeding wound, that's opening all over again. And Carrie Fisher like delivering her best performance in this entire trilogy. And then one scene that surprisingly almost undid me was that scene with young Luke and Leia training, because it was very uncanny valley still in terms of faces. And two, it has something to do with my love for Star Wars Legends books,
Yeah.
where I try not to confuse and mix the two. I mean, you've heard me speaking about this. I embrace it all. And I embrace it all not because I want to be, Star Wars. I want to be happy about it and talk only about positive things like, some clan member, like talking about Star Wars, like a new sect of Star Wars. I like them because I find genuinely very well written stuff in both canon and Legends. And in Legends, Leia is somebody who becomes very prominent in the Force, a matriarch, a teacher, a mentor. She has parts where she spots Luke really, really hard. When he's like at his emotional lowest, she's there for him. She shows the strength of character and spirit that sometimes Luke is lacking. I'm like, holy crap. And here, just the story beat where she gives up on the Jedi path, on trading future Jedi, and she lays her lightsaber down because she saw the death of her son.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that as much.
It completely cuts me off from that character and interrupts my interaction with Leia and also Luke. It's like with me, these new announcements showing, there's a new book coming with Luke and Lando Calrissian for the audience watching who don't know, which will explain the whole thing, where Luke went. He's looking for, like, I don't care at this point. I really don't care. Like, I'm sure it wasn't intentional. I'm sure it wasn't J.J. Abrams trying to upset me in any way. Like, it's such an arrogant thought offense to say, well, they did me wrong. They did me dirty with this movie. They deliberately sabotaged it. It's stupid. It's stupid to think in those terms. But just the way that it came out, I'm like, I don't want to know anything about this Luke from this canon anymore. Leave him alone. Give me somebody else. And another part that I had something to say about is the Luke and Leia's ghosts. Once again, we're coming to part. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's such an unnecessary scene. It's such a fan service. Here's a portrait of Skywalkers. I'm like, don't diminish what you have already weren't masterful enough to tell their stories. Bite the bullet. Say it like, oh, okay, we're just concluding this trilogy with this film. That's the best that we could come up with together on the fly, and just the rest of it. It's like, it's like they're adding extra to it, and I just didn't like it. But on the scene where we see Luke Skywalker and Acto interacting with Rey, two thoughts. One is, did not care for it because it's clearly trying to replicate Obi-Wan Kenobi's scene. It didn't feel there, like you said, in terms of beats, in terms of being really necessary there. At this point, Rey does not need any moral compass. She could have easily retreated back somewhere on the ship in the Millennium Falcon, sit down and droop for a couple of moments, and gather herself again and go back and do what she needs to do. She knows.
Finn help.
Oh,
Finn was that would have worked really well. He could have brought her out of the slump, but he didn't. He was doing nothing in this movie.
But the way I interpreted this scene where he captures the lightsaber, maybe I'm trying to defend Rian Johnson subconsciously because I'm such a Star Wars cult follower. I felt it was actually J.J. Abrams' nod to the previous film, because Luke evolves. He evolves throughout the Last Jedi. He still is very much stubborn self who is allowed to see that one final lesson and say, our students have to grow beyond this, right? So in this one, and you see in Luke's face at the end of the TLJ when he's doing this meditation thing where I was wrong. And this youthful woman, she brought me back from the brink. I have to go back and help my nephew, and I'm going to help him in a non-destructive Jedi way, blah, 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 blah. Here, he almost makes fun of himself when he catches that lightsaber. When he says, this is not how you should treat the Jedi, weapon. I did not feel like it's two directors bickering with each other, trying to cancel each other out. I think fans read too much into it and like only amplifying this drama that's happening outside of the films.
I don't think there's a drama between the directors. I just think that JJ specifically didn't like a lot of things Rian Johnson did. I think he even came out and said certain elements of it a little bit, like on the hush, because the main thing is for me is that one of the parts of The Last Jedi I liked the most was Rey's lineage not having any. I really like the fact you've got one element, which is Kylo Ren had a powerful family, and that still made him go to the dark side, whereas Rey had no one and she still came to the light. So it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter who your parents are, you make the decisions, you can still be good. And Rise of Skywalker, though, Yeah, well, the two most powerful people in Star Wars at the moment who are seemingly alive, their parents were two of the other most powerful people in Star Wars. It's like,
Yeah.
but the whole thing with Broom Boy in The Last Jedi was trying to show it doesn't matter who you are, you can have force powers. The whole thing is like you can. That was kind of the. I know not necessarily in the original trilogy because obviously with Darth Vader, but in A New Hope when you didn't know that it was Luke's father, it was kind of like
And
Lucas is
George
just farm
Lucas
boy
didn't
now.
know.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's just these things where I feel like the lessons that could have been learned, they just added extra layers to them that either didn't add anything or
Yeah.
just took away from it themselves. Like I wanted Luke to interact with Rey again. I think we all did, even after death. It's nice closure for her. But
Yeah.
I kind of wanted, there's certain things obviously I wanted that I didn't get in essence, which is fine. That's part of being a fan of a franchise. But like
Yeah.
I wanted some amount of, I thought, oh, if Palpatine's coming back, it'd be cool if Hayden Christensen came back. I know you hear his voice at the end.
I
But I was
wanted
like,
that too, yeah.
I was like, if you just saw him at the end, I'd actually be, if you held all the voices and then the loudest voice was Anakin's and you just saw a force ghost of him doing something, even for a few seconds, that would have really, really done me. I'd have been like, that's perfect. But because he just wasn't in it apart from his voice, I was like, I kind of wanted him a bit more in it. I felt like he could have helped turn Kylo. I get the hand thing, and I think with the, as you said, with the balance of Leia letting herself go and then kind of him being at peace with his memory of hand kind of mixed together, and that's what brings Kylo to the light. Okay, that's a very good point. I take that point, and it makes sense. But yeah, there are just certain little missteps here where
It's a
I feel
hard
like
film to defend.
it's one of those things where the film isn't bad, but I just feel there's almost no element of it that I think was like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. I just
Yeah.
think all the best bits are like 7s or maybe an 8, and all the bad bits are a lot lower. Whereas even with Last Jedi Force Awakens, there are so many moments in there, like we discussed in the other episode, when Rey's flying the Millennium Falcon for the first time. That's a great moment. When Kylo Ren and Finn are having that thing, that's a great moment. The throne scene, that's a great moment. There's loads of imagery or loads of moments in there that you can really just pick out, and you can
Yeah.
just watch that 2-minute, 5-minute clip on YouTube, and you're like, yeah, this bit's amazing.
Mhm.
Rise of Skywalker doesn't really have that. The Rey Kylo fight is cool, but I think it isn't as good as their first fight.
I want to get into it. Hold on.
So
Hold that
good.
thought.
Go on then.
I know we can't cover everything. I know, you know what? This actually is becoming as large of a conversation as the Revenge of the Sith, which I loved talking about because it's such a massive picture
Yeah.
and also a massive story, right? And who, those ideas that there is this 4-hour Revenge of the Sith cut, which I don't believe exists, but imagine just watching that. But just a couple of things I wanted to ask you in terms of story. Again, maybe we'll even come back if you're down. We'll discuss this movie more. I don't care. I'm down to talk about anything Star Wars with you. A couple of story beats that I wanted to ask you about, and either from filmmaking perspective or just from the story perspective, either way you want to discuss it. But I wanted your thoughts on Ian McDiarmid's portrayal of Palpatine in this film versus the original trilogy and versus the prequels. The Reylo romance and their kiss at the end, and the final resolution of which one of them two dies.
Okay. So start with Palpatine. I think that Ian McDiarmid's portrayal of Palpatine was absolutely excellent. I can't fault him for his performance at all. I thought that when the first scene happened on Exegol, well, the first scene is Kylo Ren fighting on Mustafar and then getting away fighting them. But when he gets to Exegol, I think him on Exegol is some of the strongest scenes in the whole of this film, and I think cinematography wise it's some of the strongest scenes in the sequel trilogy. Where you've got pathetic fallacy, the lightning striking where bad things happen, you've got this cool new planet Exegol, there's Sith stuff, there's Palpatine in the darkness, you can't quite see him, and then when the lightning shines you see his deformed face. He's alive, but he's like a half alive sort of thing, and it really works. It's like, okay, right, so Palpatine in that moment you're like, okay, so Palpatine's weak, he's hiding, it works well. I like that. And his performance was good. We've already got into kind of the story element of that, but I think he did a very good job as far as that goes. And I think that even him interacting with Rey and stuff, I think he was doing exactly what the directors wanted of him. And as a Palpatine, although I would probably argue maybe there's certain elements of the script that could have been improved somewhat, I don't think his performance could have been improved. I don't know if you have any comments before we move on to the next of the 3 points.
Yeah, sure. I thought that I believed him returning as Palpatine here a lot more than I did than in prequels. Because in prequels, because of some of those takes that George Lucas decided to take, where he clearly sounds out of sync, and it's really annoying.
There's a bit where the least favorite bit in of Palpatine's performances in all of the films is in my favorite film, Revenge of the Sith, where he goes that no, 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 and it's like, okay,
You could
this is a
hear
bit
it, right? It's not just
cartoony.
me.
Yeah,
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 it's almost cartoony.
yeah. There's a few bits of dialogue with Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith where it's just a bit,
Yeah,
certain cheesy ones like "I am the Senate," and it's like, that's a bit
yeah.
misstep. It's a funny meme now, but there are,
Versus, yeah, like versus this absolute venom he spits in every line in the original trilogy. Obviously, for
yeah.
me, nothing tops that. But when I saw this particular movie, and if you guys can hear this in the background, I do apologize. This is New York City greeting you guys.
I can't hear it very with you talking. I can barely hear it.
I think it's Palpatine's body, his cloned body, that they're trying to bring back and resurrect for the next trilogy. Palpatine, what I really enjoyed is that, as I mentioned before, I thought his performance, obviously in episode 6, is the most tremendous one, but because every line is so just like immaculate.
Not a wasted moment.
Not
for
a
him in
wasted
episode
moment,
6.
right? And in this movie, which I didn't want Palpatine back, but because he is back, I'm like, okay, let me just roll with it. First thing that I think completely sold the character for me, and I was on board, is that they don't beat about the bush. Because we saw him in the trailer, we heard his voice, and right from the beginning of the movie, I think it was a very proper decision to start with him. He's like, we're going right into it. Here's Palpatine, he's alive. Somehow he survived, and here he is. And Ian Mcdarmid, once again, I felt the same way I felt with Yoda in episode 8. It was a magical moment that makes you feel like a 6-year-old again, because he's identical not only in the looks, but also what he says and the delivery lines, that magical moment of Yoda the teacher.
Yeah.
And here, Palpatine, the schemer, this like, as I remember, I described to you Palpatine as I always imagined him as a kid, as this old ancient wizard who is never a human being, much less a politician. He's this just old, kind of like conniving, almost a wizard from Lord of the Rings, who is hundreds of years old. He's wrinkled, he's not burnt, whatever.
Yeah.
And when you see his Ian McDiarmid's performance, I felt that this is what I wanted in prequels. I wanted that raw power. I wanted a constant dark look, always in the shadow. None of that politician nonsense. I wanted the wizard. I did not want the politician. So I kind of enjoyed it, surprisingly. I did not think I was going to like it. And the second thing that I asked you that I want you to continue, please, is talk to me about the Reylo romance and their kiss, and how did you feel about that play of who gets punished and who survives at the end of the film?
Yeah, sure. I will just say one thing other with Palpatine quick, is that with one thing I did really not like is the fact that it starts off in the crawl saying Palpatine's voice echoed out, and you can't hear that voice unless you play Fortnite, which really, really aggravated me. I looked it up again. I heard it when I first, after watching the film and stuff, I looked up. The annoying thing is the speech sounds so epic, and it is so cool. If anyone's listening, just type in Palpatine Fortnite speech. It's like 40 seconds long. Loads of people put it on YouTube. It is such a good speech. I wish the film had started where the crawl comes, maybe even like before the crawl, it's just silence. You hear the Palpatine voice. Then the crawl comes up and it says, "The universe heard him talk," something like that, or even just moments after. I would have loved that because it's such a good speech and we just don't hear it in the film. That really aggravated me. But Reylo. So I like the Diet of the Force continuing. I thought that was quite a cool idea. I really liked that as a plot device. I thought that made some very good visuals. I thought that made some of the fighting they had when she was down on the planet and he was in the Death Star and they swapped
The
places,
steadfast
basically.
ship, right?
Yeah.
Where
I really like
yeah.
that. Yeah, and I thought that was really cool. I like that element of it. I didn't like the kiss. I know a lot of people have different views on that, and that's fine. I think JJ said it was meant to be like a thank you. I didn't really feel that. I feel like if they had hugged, really just they did hug anyway, but if they'd have just hugged, I feel like it would have, for me, done it a bit more, because although there was, I think I'm certain that you feel differently with this, but like, although I feel like there definitely was a connection there, I feel like it went deeper than just a physical sexual connection. I know the kiss wasn't explicit or anything, but like, I feel like with their connection Last Jedi, it was them discovering themselves. And I feel like with the Rise of Skywalker, it was them coming to the end of that journey. And I just don't feel like the kiss added anything to their relationship. I feel like it took away a bit. It made it seem like they just kind of fancied each other rather than there being a deep rooted respect for each other and a connection there that's true. It just felt like, oh, I'm dying, I'll give you a kiss, goodbye, see you later, yeah, I love you, sort of thing. It was like, but I felt like they had a beyond that kind of connection, like a way that they were struggling that no one else was. If they'd like lived, if they'd have kissed and lived and both lived, that for me would have made sense. But because he was going, I know in the context of the story, if you're thinking you're about to die, you probably want to kiss someone you're attracted to who's near you. I get that. But I just feel like for me, their relationship was always deeper than just a physical thing. And I feel like the kiss kind of reduced it back a little bit. What about you?
I loved it. I loved the kiss. I loved the relationship because regardless of how far this movie will go propping or deconstructing their relationship, there was already enough established in the previous two films for me to believe in their romance. Because she's a 19-year-old kid in the first film. She's literally a child, right? And going through these emotional experiences and finding somebody else to connect with, because the way that I perceived them always as these two orphans, even though Kylo has parents, he kind of like becomes torn away from them because of his ideologies, right? Being manipulated by Snoke, and she's looking for her parents. She's looking for larger meaning in life. They connect to each other. I really love the Force telescoping, the dyads, whatever you want to call it, which helps them to communicate, right? I really love the moments where she's like, hey, can you put something on? Because for a moment, we forget about this philosophical mumbo-jumbo, and it's just two human beings, and she's a teenager, and clearly they're both very handsome people, right? Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley. She's gorgeous. Yeah, you're going to have some attraction. And I felt that sexual tension where sitting in Luke's hut and they're holding, touching hands. It's a very, very sexual moment. I think that's beautiful because to me, you can't have a relationship without sexual attraction. You can talk about and praise all the philosophical ideas and the kindred spirits and souls. You need intimacy. You need kisses. You need hugging. Just people touching each other gives you a lot of gratification, right? You don't have to be sexually involved with somebody. You're with your girlfriend somewhere. Just holding hands, feeling the warmth of another person. It's very, very intimate. And at the end where they're there, so I completely was into Reylo romance. I think it's one of the most successful things in the trilogy and in this film because it almost feels like by the middle of the film, I felt like it's a couple bickering. I'm like, oh, but she's like, no, I'm when she says she heals Ben and she says, I'm speaking to Ben. I'm not talking to Kylo Ren. She's like, hey, like, step up your shit. Like, I'm digging you. Like, come out of this, you know? It's like almost a girlfriend trying to talk down to her boyfriend to appeal to his consciousness. And when they kiss at the end, I don't understand why J.J. Abrams would need to clarify or defend that scene. I thought personally it was very effective. And it was of sexual nature. It was because of romance, and it wasn't shallow at all. And in that moment, I understood why one of them had to go. And I understood why it was Ben, because he is redeemed, but he needed to pay for his actions. There had to be some physical repercussions for what you were doing. And in a way, he's returning back what he has learned from her, not only the power to heal, but sacrificing his life. Something that Luke Skywalker teaches him in episode 8. A lot of people don't like to think about it in those terms. That's what Luke does. He sacrifices his body, almost a Christ figure, to appeal to his nephew's senses. And the interesting thing about Kylo Ren, which Adam Driver delivers perfectly throughout this entire trilogy, is how undecided Kylo Ren is. He is not 100% villain. He's more of a tragic hero, fallen hero. If Anakin Skywalker is a hero, a light in the shadow who slowly and gradually becomes extinguished, like we know he's spiraling out of freaking control, and there is no way back for him, right? When he kills the younglings in a Tuscan village, and then he tells her, like, I know something gets messed up with me and I can't fix it. You feel for Anakin. I feel for him in the prequels. And I also felt for Kylo Ren that he needed to go. And her kiss to him was a sign like, I wish for things that could have been between us. Because as
Yeah.
every woman is, as every mother is, she's already making plans ahead and forward. It's like, oh, it's going to be happily ever after, but it's not meant to be. And I felt this scene was very powerful and traumatic for me, and just I enjoyed it a lot.
That's fair enough. Yeah, it's one of those scenes where it's either. Well, I'm not one of those things that's like gung ho. I hated it. I was just like I wasn't overly a fan.
Yeah.
For me, I thought that the evidence of their relationship was apparent. Once again, it's one of those things where I feel like a lot of this film does is it doesn't show you in a sense of just kind of being like people reading between the lines, letting the audience figure things out. It has to tell you every single thing up front. Rey's struggling with the dark side. How do we know? We see a force vision of her being bad. It's like we didn't do that with Luke in the same way. You did it more cleverly. And I think it's the same with the Kylo Ren relationship. I know obviously Han and Leia, they do kiss and stuff, and it takes away somewhat from what I was saying, but it's one of those things where for me personally, I wasn't as into that. When it comes to the sacrifice, I alluded to it earlier, but I knew they wouldn't do this. I knew it. I wish I'd have bet money on it. I knew they would have killed Kylo Ren. I knew it was going to happen. And that's what angered me, that it's too similar to Return of the Jedi. And what I would have absolutely adored is for him to have survived. And even if he was like mortally wounded and maybe even some sort of twist of fate, like he had to wear a breathing mask, but he was redeemed wearing a mouth breathing thing and it was white or something and just covered that part of him. And if they'd have done that or something like that, and him, then they could have done a comic or a book or even an animated show of Kylo Ren trying to do things to redeem himself. He's locked up in a New Republic prison. Everyone hates him, especially Finn, who despises him. The only person in the whole of the New Republic who likes him is Rey, and the only reason he's not dead is for her. She stopped him getting court-martialed. Because none of his family are there anymore. So she would have been the one to save him, and then in return, he would have to spend his entire life giving his force powers to the good of the New Republic. He has to go around, he has to crush out the Imperial remnant, he has to support Rey, he has to go through all these things, and every time he does a mission for them, he gets locked away in his cage again. And he gets to redeem himself through actions, not just oh, I died for the good person to live, and that wipes my hands, washes it all clean of the mass genocide I committed, the people I slaughtered in front of others, the people I killed in cold blood, killing Han Solo. All these things don't get redeemed by you just killing the Knights of Ren and then letting Rey live and killing Palps. That doesn't. With Darth Vader, I don't think it works in a better way because it's confined story. It was one of the earliest of the big budget, sort of in a big film sense, having a redemption arc like of that gravity. So that worked. We've done that. We've done a redemption arc really well. If you're going to do a redemption arc again, do something different about it. I would have just the way Disney could have had so many cool things, even if Adam Driver didn't want to return. Having some stories with the redeemed Kylo Ren would have been so fresh and so different and so unexpected and so new. Just like the final scenes of him getting locked away or something, and Rey putting her hand up to the glass and his hand being there, and her saying something like, "I won't give up on you," and him saying something like, "You didn't. I'm still here." And that could be something, something like that. I would have just loved that.
Mike, you're talking about the next trilogy, honestly. You are describing what could have been the next trilogy. Seriously. It sounds very compelling. I like your thoughts. I'm like, now I'm thinking to myself, what if they had a little bit more foresight? It's like, hey guys, by the way, we're not concluding the Skywalker saga. It's going to go on and on and on and on. That sounds actually quite compelling. Interesting.
Yeah, that's what I would have wanted. I didn't think I was going to get that, but it was just my biggest problem with the sequel trilogy is that it's too similar to the original trilogy, and it's just not quite as good in a lot of ways. Yeah. But I think that Last Jedi and Force Awakens had enough of their own merits to really push it up to be like, look, we've got these similarities, but these things are different, so that's okay. And I just feel like with The Rise of Skywalker, there's some cool elements in it, but they were too much too late, like force healing. Like that was in Legends for ages, but why bring it into the canon on the 9th movie without really just explaining? Like she said, "Oh, I read in this old textbook that had some missing pages that I found in the year between this film, and it taught me how to do force healing." Luke almost got there, but there's been one page that's been lost to the Jedi for hundreds of years. Cool, not just there's these ancient Jedi books. Not just even I think they kind of vaguely reference it, but I don't think they even really say it. It's just like, oh, Rey knows force healing now. Oh, how? Couldn't have other Jedi in all of the other films used that ability? They could have done. okay, so there's just no further explanation. It's just
Yeah.
little things like that where it's like
Yeah.
too many big similarities to the originals, not enough of the other things. Wasn't there one other thing you can ask me of the three? Or am I missing one? There was Rey and Kylo,
The
Palpatine, and
relocust, and who of them, which one of them died? You kind of
oh, I see.
answered that. We did answer it at length. Mike, I want to start wrapping things up here a little bit. I
No
just
problem.
had one final quick topic for us to tap into,
Yeah,
just
no
like
problem.
very
No rush.
briefly, and then we'll start wrapping up.
That's cool.
In terms of lightsaber action sequences, we had Kylo versus Rey on his ship Steadfast, which was like telescoping a diet kind of duel,
Yeah.
right? Which we didn't quite see before. Then we had their fight on the sinking Death Star. And then we had them fight, of course, now Ben, resurrected hero Ben and Rey versus the Knights of Ren versus the Emperor. Which did you feel was the most interesting action sequence in the film? If you want to mention one that doesn't have to deal with lightsaber duels, by all means, please.
I think the first one was the best. It was the most different. It was the most interesting. The imagery was excellent. I like how they're swinging about and fighting, and then one thing gets destroyed where she is, then one thing gets destroyed where he is, and
Yeah.
that makes him figure out where she is and stuff. I like that element. I thought it was quite clever. I enjoyed that. With the Death Star fight, I thought it was good. I think it was a bit lackluster for me. I don't think there was quite enough of some of what I wanted. Like, it doesn't compare to the Revenge of the Sith Mustafar fight for me. I know the imagery is opposite because you're water, lava, and stuff, but I thought it was obviously a lot shorter than that. There were some cool visuals, but there was just something about it that didn't quite hit me in the same way that the throne scene or their first fight in Force Awakens did, and it didn't compare to some of the fights I like in the prequels. When it came to the final fight with Ben and Rey, I will
versus
say one
the
thing.
Emperor, and they're doing this. And she's doing that with the lightsabers.
Exactly. One thing that aggravated me with that, and actually the whole film really annoyed me, is that right at the very end, when you get Rey and you get her lightsaber and it's yellow and it's that staff, that is such a cool design for a lightsaber. That should have been in from the start.
Yeah.
When Rian Johnson ended The Last Jedi with Anakin's lightsaber being broken in half, I think that was him nodding, saying Rey could have a double-bladed lightsaber. That would be cool. What if she used the crystals to have that? It would be in her staff thing. And I was like, I can't wait to see that. And they're like, oh, she just magically fixed Anakin's lightsaber off screen and is using it perfectly fine and we'll never talk about it again. It's like, do we have to keep using this damn lightsaber? Why is the obsession with this lightsaber? Especially because like Luke only used it for a tiny amount in A New Hope. He used it a bit in Empire, and then Return of the Jedi, he's got his own lightsaber.
Iconography,
so
I would say. It's just it's damn filmmakers being fans and doing fan servicey things.
I just think it could have been in the Rise of Skywalker, but I just wanted Rey in the final battle to have her own saber. It would have really hit home of her finding her own person, rather than going, oh, right at the very end, this character's never coming back, allegedly. Oh, she's got a cool lightsaber that you never get to see again. So, oh, thank you. Good. Thanks for showing me something we could have had, but don't.
Yeah.
But the fight scene itself, I mean, as I said, I do like the Ben Solo stuff, but the more I rewatched the Knights of Ren bit with Ben, there's one bit of choreography that I noticed got picked up by someone on YouTube. And it's the bit where he's fighting them all, and they seem to not really be trying that hard. They're looking like the Knights of Ren are meant to be this really powerful sort of group of hunters, even though they're never shown to be on screen, but they're kind of meant to be. And when he's fighting them, it's like one guy in the middle of all of them. And he does this bit where he like leans forward with his lightsaber behind him and they just hit his back. And you're like, what are you doing? If someone turns their back to me and I'm looking at them, I'm not going to aim for their lightsaber. I'm going to go for their legs or their head or something. And I liked him pulling the lightsaber out, and that moment was cool. But when you actually watch the fight scene, especially compare it to the throne room scene, it's got nothing on the throne room scene at all.
Yeah.
The X with the lightsabers with Rey and that bit, it was cool. But I'm just bloody sick of so many films in the last 15 years of doing, let's have a big blue beam in the sky and that's the big bad thing, and it destroys everything around it and you've got to shut it off, or it opens up a portal to a demon or something. It's like, it happened in Avengers Assemble. That's fine. That was 2012. And then it happened in Suicide Squad. It happens in so many DC and Marvel films, and it's happening in so many other action films or alien films and sci-fi. And it's like, can we have anything other than a blue beam in the sky, please? And then Palpatine gets killed by his lightning again. And you're like, in all three endings of Star Wars, 3, 6, and 9, Palpatine, although 3, he doesn't get killed from it,
But
he
he's
gets
defeated
beaten.
by it. Yeah.
Yeah, every time. You're like, dude, just stop shooting lightning at your fingers and you'll be fine. Like, you're this unbelievably powerful Force user who's got
Yeah.
all this energy that you've sucked from Kylo and Ren. You've rebuilt yourself. You're the most powerful Sith in the canon. You're shooting lightning up that is so powerful, it's destroying entire ships. That is an unfathomable amount of power.
My
And then you
brother and my friends, when they were sitting in the theater watching it with me, I knew they're disliking this movie hard when like he started shooting the beam up. My brother was just burst out laughing. They were laughing at this movie.
Yeah, it was just frustrating because I liked the
Yeah.
imagery having that and all the Jedi behind her and all that stuff. I loved hearing their voices and listening to it again and being able to hear, Kanan's and Ahsoka's and Ayla Secura, I think, and Adi Gallia randomly, and then also Kaidi Mundi and all kinds of different Jedi. And I really liked that element. And I thought I feel like they could have done maybe a bit more with it, but I really liked it. But the Palpatine killing himself bit was just so, once again, just so done before. So I feel like the Kylo Ren bit, him fighting the Knights of Ren, was a bit weak, and it just showed that, as you said right at the start of this conversation, the Knights of Ren are the biggest waste of space in the sequel trilogy. They look brilliant, and that is literally it.
They
don't do anything else.
Yeah. With me, I would agree with you that Kylo versus Rey first duel was the most interesting one because it's something that we haven't seen before. But if I were to criticize the sequel trilogy as a whole, I would say that in general, there isn't a single action scene that is truly memorable, that truly stands out. Like I mentioned before, we discussed the Force Awakens. I thought the Millennium Falcon, it was cool. The first lightsaber was cool, how refined it felt. The throne room is cool. I still like it. There's nothing bad about it, but there's also nothing about them that stands out. And to give you an example, I found the greatest duel in all of the Star Wars, that's video games, movies, books, whatever I've seen, is Return of the Jedi. It's particularly that last segment where Luke says, no, he screams out when Vader says, so you have a sister too. And that final stretch, that final launch. And the beauty of that scene, it's not the technicality or choreography. It's the emotional component and the baggage that's in it. That's what makes it interesting. And for me, Rey having versus the ultimate villain, Palpatine, just exchange of words, and then she doesn't want to directly attack him because it's a PC world. We only save what we love. We don't chop their heads off. She kills them with his own lightning. I felt it was just so anticlimactic and not interesting because not everything needs to carry a spiritual, meaningful, meaning. It could be just very literal, just badass stuff like, oh shit, she could do stuff. She could like bounce off the wall like Anakin could go to something like that, right? None of it is here. And I felt that this film of all three suffers the most from action in general. That just wasn't very interesting for me. None of it. Yeah. The space battle, especially in contrast with Rogue One, which is magnificent. I would put it on par with the greatest Star Wars space duel, the attack on the Endor moon. Right? That the strategy, the war theater of it, the communication between the rebels and the Imperials, the commands, that amazing, spectacular. It's like you're watching a true war movie in space. None of it was here, and especially in this film.
Yeah, the ending, I've got a note here which said the ending of, I want to also mention Hux before we log off here.
That's right. No. My time is what is your time is. Talk about Hux.
That's cool. But before that is with the ending thing, like what annoyed me once again, and it's with the trailers. And I think this film suffered a lot by the marketing department, because I would have made the trailers completely different.
Yeah,
they ruined the films, and they didn't ruin the film in a sense of the film now sucks because of the trailers. It's just a lot of the cool bits, whereas like some unexpected things, like
they spoiled the fun.
Yeah, Palpatine being in it, Lando being in it. It's like all these little surprises. There's no surprise apart from Chewie dying that never happened. It was like, okay, cool. But with the bit at the end, we knew it was happening because in the trailer, the big part of the end of the final trailer is all of the ships all being there, and the Millennium Falcon lifting up. So you go. So when there's those bits where Palpatine's cackling and whatever, and Poe's like, no one's coming, and it's like we all know someone's coming. But we not only do we already know it, we've actually literally seen the shot when they all appear. So it's even more so taken away from the fact of that.
Yeah.
And then they all appear, and it's like you could have a list of endless Star Wars characters. You could have Hera Syndulla's name call out. You could have Kaz from Star Wars Resistance, even though I hate Star Wars Resistance, but you could still have his name. I know in the books they extended books, they had a few more. Obviously, I liked Wedge being in it. That was cool. He could have been in it more. He had one line. I was just like, see, you amass the entire Star Wars galaxy there, and you have no one really say anything.
They're faceless.
And it just becomes, and they all just becomes this, oh, there's the ghost there. Are they going to say anything? No. Pew, pew, pew. And it's like, okay, cool. So we've just got this big, messy scene. There's no stakes to it now because everyone's just magically there. And then you're just like, well, and all these Star Destroyers, that every single one of them can blow up a planet. It's like, well, obviously they're all going to get destroyed then. There's just no, it was just this whole thing where, what's bad? Everything's bad. What do you mean? What ships do we target? All of them. Okay, what do we have to kill? Palpatine, why? Because he can kill everything with his lightning fingers. And you're like, is there anything that isn't everything? Do you know what I mean? Like, it would just seem like everything all at once means that nothing has the same impact.
Upping the ante does not always work. And like I mentioned in the last conversation about The Last Jedi, the reason that Nolan trilogy of Batman films work is because they don't try to up one another. They're stylistically different films. Each one has to offer that the previous film doesn't want. If you notice the Planet of the Apes, same thing. They're completely three different films. It's film directors who have a strategy of what they're showing you and foresight of like, okay, if I'm going to do this time, I can't replicate myself. I got to do something different. Mike,
agree.
The last closing thoughts on this film. If you want to give it a score, by all means, but what would you say is the biggest success and the biggest flaw of A Rise of the Skywalker?
Okay. I'm going to mention here because I don't think it's the biggest flaw, but I'm going to mention because it aggravated me. It's the one thing I haven't mentioned yet, I think, of my list.
And Hux. Take your time, please.
That's fine. Hux. Hux really annoyed me because I know you weren't as much a fan of him as I was, but I thought Hux was such a good character. He, for me, was almost like Tarkin, not in the same way how he acted, because Tarkin was very collected and very, but he was kind of like a alternate version of Tarkin. But what if Tarkin was basically a little bitch? And that works for me. I thought that was really cool. What if Tarkin, instead of kind of butting heads with Vader and being an equal from Palpatine, Palpatine looked at Tarkin and Vader as kind of equals in a lot of ways for different reasons. Tarkin was never afraid of Vader. With Hux and Kylo Ren, there was a dynamic shift that was different. When Snoke was there, it was one thing. When Snoke was gone, it was different. But you still had him butting heads with Ren, even though Ren always overpowered him. He used the Force, he threw him about. So you had this bit with this rage under Hux. But the fact that Hux would betray something that he's been in his entire life, everything he's ever believed in, he committed mass genocide, all for this thing, and he throws all of it away because he doesn't like the fact that Kylo Ren is like, I don't care if we win. I just want Kylo Ren to lose. It's like, what a pathetic line. And then that bit where he betrays him and Poe's like, I knew it. And Finn's like, no, you didn't. He's like, no, I didn't see that coming. It's like, don't have characters say out loud you didn't see that coming. What terrible writing. You don't say that in real life. If someone betrays you in war, you don't go, well, I didn't see that coming. Or someone like a scout person. You don't say those things.
Very juvenile,
Yeah, and then he gets killed immediately, just like boom. And who we've got instead? Pride. Who is he? Well, he was like Hux was before we called him a betrayer 10 minutes ago. Why have I like the guy who played Pride? He's in loads of great stuff, and I can't remember his name.
He was great in Logan.
Yes.
Right? He plays the evil scientist. He was awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, he was great in that, and he was good in Loki as well, as old man Loki as well. He was great. He's great in lots of things. I forget his name, but I haven't got a problem with his acting. I just think his character didn't need to exist because it was just what Hux was. But they were like, we want to kill Hux because we're going to say he betrayed the whole of the First Order, and then we're going to kill him and just replace him with someone else. Like, don't do that. So, sorry. So things, best thing and worst thing. I think probably a mixture between the style of Exegol at the start, I think is one of the best parts of the movie, mixed with Kylo Ren's general journey, including the Diet of the Force. Although I've got a lot of issues with Kylo Ren's journey, I thought in general they did a good job. Adam Driver's acting was amazing. We got some Kylo Ren action at the start. We got a couple of lightsaber battles. We got the Diet in the Force. We got. I quite liked his helmet that fit by Kensuke, I think it is, or something like that, where they repaired it and all the things. I mean, obviously it was a marketing stunt, and I don't. When you see it smashed in Last Jedi, you could not fix that to that degree. I don't care what kind of magic you've got in space. Do not think that. But putting that aside, it looked really cool. I enjoyed it somewhat. And I think him being killed, as you kind of said, by Rey and then healed, that was a good rebirthing thing, the balance with everything. So I think Kylo Ren as a whole, 80% of Kylo Ren in this film for me really was really good. I really enjoyed that element. the parts I thought were bad, or the worst part, I think was genuinely just the plot, which is such a wide thing. But I think it's just one of those things where, and it's the opposite to the sequel trilogy, to the prequel trilogy in certain ways, because I think the prequels for me have some excellent plot. It's just the dialogue is awful in places, and it's got quite a few jarring bits pieces here. Whereas this one's kind of the opposite, where there's a bit of dialogue that's a bit rubbish, but it's not quite the same level of jarring as, you know, some of the prequel characters. But the plot is just really surface level. There's just there's no depth to it. There's no weight. There's no real. You never feel the whole thing with this film. Actually, my big criticism when I first watched it, I said my biggest problem is there never felt like there were any stakes, because they were so intent on telling you that the world was going to end that there just didn't seem like anything bad was going to happen. And the fact that in the final battle, aside from Ben, the only character with a name I can remember dying is Snap Wexley. I love Snap. I thought he was great. He's a fun character. He's barely.
Who's Snap again? Remind me.
He's a bit of a bigger guy. He's got a beard and stuff, and he's
J.J. Abrams' friend, right?
I don't know if he might be his friend.
I
don't know the actor who plays him, but I know the character because in the Aftermath books, he's in it. He's in the Aftermath
X-Wing
books.
pilot, right?
Yeah, because his mum.
He's J.J. Abrams' friend.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, I like his character, Snap, just because of his backstory in the Aftermath books. And he's like the only person of note who dies in that whole battle somehow. Everyone else survives apart from Ben, which is baffling. So I just think there were no stakes at all. There was no, as soon as Palpatine was announced and all this stuff, I just knew exactly how the film was going to go. For almost the whole film, I knew how it was going to go. There were very little actual surprises for me. There was a few little ones, you know, Rey shot lightning out and, you know, Rey being Palpatine, I kind of saw that coming somewhat because I was like, when it kind of started to allude to it. So I was just like, there weren't enough big surprises and the plot was too predictable for something that should have been a nice big full stop on the end of a saga. It kind of just, it didn't feel like a nice, smooth, everything finishes here. It was just like, oh, and the ride stops. Okay, see ya. Off the ride, off we go. It just, you know what I mean? That's kind of how it felt to me.
Mike, not to sound negative, just to be honest, and not in a context of, you know, I told you so. Now you have a real sense of how I felt when I watched Revenge of the Sith. You know, it's, again, I'm not bringing the film down at all. There's quite a bit of things that I like about it, but I felt like I knew where it's heading. I knew what the stakes are, and a lot of plot made sense, but the way that it was delivered, it interrupted my enjoyment of the film. But I do want to say that of all the films walking out of the Revenge of the Sith, I did not feel one bit of being like wounded, like, oh my God. I came away, I was like, yeah, this one is the closest to what I love. Like this one, I had a kick with it, you know? Obviously, as a fan, you're being greedy. Obviously, you want more. But I came with it, I was like, for what it is, I mean, I can't change it. I can't go and, you know, remake the movie. Yeah, I'm digging this, you know? Anyway, with the Rise of the Skywalker, I did not see it or the entire trilogy as the conclusion to Skywalker saga. Because at the end of the day, I am the one who makes decisions here. I don't care what Lucasfilm or Disney or George Lucas tell me what Star Wars is. What's important is how I interact with it, right? I am the end user of it. So I'm like, okay, this is what they're doing. They're kind of trying to market it to the original fans by having the original cast, and they have these old new kids. Let me see what the new kids are doing, right? Yeah. This is what I signed up for. This is my part of this Star Warsy thing that I'm going to pay attention to. I felt the movie's biggest triumph was bringing Kylo Ren's transformative experience and Rey's journey to an end. I'm not saying it was perfect. When we say triumph, I mean within the context of the film. It wasn't amazing. I would not give this movie a single Oscar. It's just not there for me. It's not a bad film. I would probably score it like a very generous 6.5. Not a bad film.
I think I'd give it a 6.
Maybe if I were supremely biased, I would give it a 7 because I did enjoy it on the second watch quite a bit more than the first time.
Each time I've watched it, I've enjoyed it more.
Yeah, and each time I watch it, I'm not like rationalizing why I like it. I'm not convincing myself that I like it. I just do. I'm like, okay. It feels like a 5-hour movie that's squeezed into a 3-hour movie, and J.J. Abrams is telling me like, all right, guys, we're starting in 1, 2, 3. You know your Star Wars, right? We're gonna go real fast. You know what I mean? It's for those people. That's why, like, Most of my friends came out hating it. I came out, I was like, I'm smiling, wide smile. I'm like, guys, I like it. And they were all laughing at me like, you're BSing us, right? You're being ironic. You're joking. You can't like this garbage. I said, no, guys, I enjoy it. So for me, this is the plot line. This is the one element that sticks the most. Rey and Ben coming together. What I would say is the biggest flaw is the non-existent plot, the non-existent journey, the non-existent villain. It's very rightly called a movie that is made by a committee. It's like 15 different heads trying to please 15 different kinds of fans. And we all know Star Wars fans are very different. We're all different tastes. I would rather have a movie that gambles like the Last Jedi and flops and fails miserably than have a movie that's safe, that have a movie that is a marketing product, a movie that tries to please everybody. And that's what this movie is. But again, maybe I'm coming from a biased angle. When I put it on, and I plan to watch it again, and I watch it, it is enjoyable. I can't follow it. It is not completely dissonant. It's not garbage. It's not trash filmmaking. What I would classify as trash filmmaking is Fast and the Furious movies. What I would consider trash is the Chronicles of Riddick, of Underworld. I don't know. These movies are just like, what am I watching? The Van Helsing. You look at these older flicks, I'm like, what am I looking at? It's like, oh my God. You can follow it from start to finish, and you can pluck things that you enjoy, and you pluck things out, and you say, like, I don't like that. You know, that's what this movie's for me.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, with in the rating thing, and I've got a question for you actually, is like I do enjoy Rise of Skywalker. I think it's the weakest of the sequel trilogy by quite a bit for me. And I think of all the Disney Star Wars films, I think it's the weakest as well. I think Solo is probably the one step up in a similar way that there's not as many moments for me that was like, this is phenomenal. You know, Revenge of the Sith, with all its flaws, it's got so many moments, the Order 66 montage, the Mustafar battle, the start is incredible. Like, there's so many elements, which is like a scene you could take out and be like, I love this bit. But with The Rise of Skywalker, I found there weren't that many bits of it. But I want to ask you actually, of all the Star Wars films, which one is your least favorite? Because for me, I think that Rise of Skywalker and The Phantom Menace are probably my two lowest rated for me of all the films. But Phantom Menace is because I think Jar Jar makes it insufferable, but the ending and the pod racing redeems it. Whereas Rise of Skywalker is not like there's these big moments that suck. It's just, it never hits those highs. So you've kind of got one film that is kind of like, whip. Whereas you've got this film that's just kind of like, you know what I mean? They're two very different, but they're both low-ish in that realm. I still like them both.
I follow you. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, what's your thoughts?
I know you like prequels.
You can be as horrible as you want.
I still like this film more than any prequel. I think
more than even Revenge of the Sith. Wow.
Yes, I do. I think for me personally, the sequel trilogy, as messy as it is, I'm the last person to defend anything I dislike. And when I dislike something, I say it. I'm just from that generation. I don't need to cater to anyone. Like, I just had this little thing with on Twitter, and I decided not to sink into that deep rabbit hole of trying to bicker with people when I say that Legends books were never originally canon. But what do you mean? They're lying. You know, George Lucas said Star Wars is what I say Star Wars is, period. There's no two ways about it. I'm not going to write you an article about this. If you felt like my line, my quote is being offensive, then you're the one who is looking to be offended. That's the kind of person I am. I express myself. I'm a very opinionated person. But the reason I have you on the podcast is not only you're a very lovable, charming person, is that I can respect your opinion, which is not the same as mine. Just because I don't have an opinion, it doesn't mean I'm right. Yeah. For me personally, I honestly enjoyed it more than The Revenge of the Sith. I think Revenge of the Sith is a movie that had qualities about it that are obviously better than this film. Like, it knew where it's heading. It had a structure. It had a point to it. There is a marvel of a story hiding in it. A diamond is in the rough. its execution makes me really, really hard. There's again, I watched Revenge of the Sith, and when Anakin says, "You turned her against me," I'm like, And then we have a Kenobi say, "You were the chosen, Anakin," and my heart is bleeding. And then we have, "I can't bear to watch," and then he's riding like a CGI lizard. I'm like, Jesus Christ. And then we have other moments where like, oh man, it's like being a bipolar, having a bipolar disorder for 3 hours long. It's hard. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough to enjoy that movie, but I recognize the genius of what George was trying to tell, because he did come after this movie, and in 2008, to me, told one of the greatest Star Wars stories, which is the Clone Wars franchise, the show. I like Revenge of the Rise of the Skywalker more. My least all-time Star Wars film will always be The Phantom Menace. Aside from the duel with Darth Maul and Kenobi, it has nothing to offer to me. Mm-hmm. Every time, it's the movie that I still watch it in my marathons. I put it on, and every time it's a freaking grind. It's a grind. I don't enjoy watching it. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, Padre scene. This is what Liam Neeson was trying to do with the character. Yes, Palpatine, the Darth Maul. Let's watch part 2. Part 2, I watch completely different beat. I'm like, yeah, the Undercity, of course, and hell yeah. Oh, Jango Fett. Oh, the battle. I'm in it. I'm invested. Yep. Part 1 is just like, the pulse is dead. How about you? How about you, man?
Yeah, I think Phantom is my least favorite of probably all. Like, if you said to me right now, you have to watch a Star Wars film, what would you want to watch? It would. Well, that's a different question. But if you said, you have to watch all the Star Wars films, where do you start?
Exactly.
One. Yeah. If you said you have to watch them all, but you can skip any one, I just skip Phantom Menace. I think it's the most uneven, and it has the most amount of bad in it and the least amount of redeeming stuff. And although I think the Rise of Skywalker frustrates me a lot more, and it aggravates me because I feel like, I know it sounds like a really douchey thing to say, but if they'd let me see the final cut and just let me tweak like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes of footage, not even reshoot necessarily, just tweak a bit of dialogue here and there, tweak a few things. I feel like half the problems of the Rise of Skywalker could have been solved with just a bit more of this and a bit less of that.
It could have been better
ways.
Yeah.
But I think with it, regardless of that, because I think the plot was a bit weak as well from the core, maybe, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I just think with Rise of Skywalker, it frustrates me more because I think my hopes were a lot higher. But I think The Phantom Menace is a worse film. I think it just is, as you say. Pod racing's cool, but I've seen it so many times. It's just like it's my generation's Death Star run, basically. Yeah. And it is very cool, and a lot of it is good, but it's not my favorite part about Star Wars.
Yeah, I think now it's New York saying goodbye to us. It's telling us to wrap up this podcast. Mike, it was a real pleasure to have you on. Very, very interesting thoughts on. It's interesting for me to understand and analyze what fans dislike about this movie, what they do like. Kind of puts it all in perspective. It's really cool watching it and looking at the whole trilogy after the fact that the movie is out. It's been 2 years, and we can all sit down and have a conversation about it, not like scream over each other who's right, who's wrong. Please remind everyone where people can find your podcasts, what are the kind of material that they can expect to find, and so on.
That's fine. Well, thank you as always for having me on the show, Ben. It's always an absolute delight to speak with you. And as I said, before the end of the year, I'll have you on my show as well. So I've got my show, Genuine Chit-Chat. You can find it on Spotify, any podcasting app, or here on YouTube. There's some video versions of some of my conversations. I've spoken with Claudia Gray, the author. I've spoken with Alex and Molly of Star Wars Explained. I have recently recorded a conversation with Paolo Villanelli, who is one of the comic artists for the ongoing Star Wars run of Bounty Hunters, and he also did the Lando Double or Nothing comics as well. So that's going to be released within the next week. So the first week of November, you'll see that, and there's a video version of that too. So if you want to hear conversation with people, it could be, there's authors, there's actors, there's content creators, there's travelers, there's basically all kinds of different people, including someone on episode 52 who was a magister for the Church of Satan. So I've spoken to a lot of people. If you like the interview style conversations that aren't too formal, that are a bit more chilled out and have conversations that just like you may not expect, check out Genuine Chit-Chat. And then my other show is Star Wars Comics in Canon. And the pitch for that is, if you've never read a Star Wars comic in your life, or if you've read every Star Wars comic in existence, I'd be very surprised and very impressed if you had, check out my show, because I go through the plot details of comics that are new ones or some of the older ones that are in the canon. And then I also talk about the many, many connections in there. So it's a good way to either check it out if you have no desire to read the comics, we can't afford to get a hand of all the comics or whatever, not the time, or if you want a refresher on some of the comics you've read, so some of the connections you may have missed, especially with the stuff in the canon. So you can find me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat. There will be a link, because Ben always kindly puts my link in the description, where it goes to my YouTube and all the different places that you can find Star Wars comics and canon or Genuine Chit-Chat. But if you're on YouTube, you should be able to find it by searching Genuine Chit-Chat. And all of my videos for Star Wars and for Genuine Chit-Chat are all posted on that very feed. And thank you so much again, Ben, for having me. It's always a delight talking to you.
Awesome. It was fun. And guys, probably within 5 minutes of this podcast, you probably noticed that Michael is a lot more established podcaster than I am. Just the way he talks, the professionalism, the way he expresses his thoughts. I'm like, I need to take notes here. Anyway, point is, go check out his content. He does awesome stuff. If you enjoyed this podcast as well, please feel free to join my channel. Hit that bell button. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have Mike back to talk about more interesting Star Wars stuff. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.
See you later, guys.